Good evening, good morning, good night. Whatever the case may be, it's me, Coach Hughes. And we have another video lecture for you today. Clean shaven, as I might add. And just got a haircut too. So still got some hair. How about that? So we have been talking about the ancient Israelites, also known as the Jews, also known as the Hebrews. So, our last conversation, chapter 7, section 1, we were discussing where the location was, and we talked about how the Hebrews were in Canaan, and the modern day countries there, I believe, were Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. And we had been talking about the Egyptians. So Egypt is on the continent of Africa. So if you go north and northeast, you would definitely run in to that area of Canaan. We talked about how all the Hebrews believed that they were descendants from one man, and that one man was named Abraham. Abraham's grandson, Jacob, had 12 sons of his own, and those 12 sons became really the 12 tribes of Israel. After about 100 years drought, they moved down to what they visualized as paradise themselves, and that would be Egypt. They were almost immediately enslaved. Uh, all the baby boys were ordered by the Pharaoh to be thrown in the Nile River. And then the Pharaoh's daughter discovered a baby in a basket, Moses. Moses grew up on the outskirts of Egypt there, kind of a outsider, I guess you could say. And he believed he heard God's voice and God kind of commanding him to lead his people out of Egypt, known as the Exodus. And he could only have done that because the Bible says that Egypt was plagued with 10 plagues. The light turning to darkness, the cattle dying, boils on your skin, and much more. The last one coming full circle and killing all the firstborn children there that did not mark their doors with lamb's blood like the Israelites did. Out of Egypt, we had the parting of the Red Sea, the escape. Took 40 years to get back to Canaan. Along the way, Moses went to the top of Mount Sinai, where he was given the 2 stone tablets, the 10 commandments. Moses also came up with Mosaic laws, daily life, how the Jews could eat and what clothes they wore, and even how they prayed. And then that 40-year trip, Moses dies, and Joshua, son of Nun, takes over. They reach Canaan only to find someone sleeping in their bed, like the story of Goldilocks goes. A group of people called the Canaanites lived there. Joshua led them into battle. They marched around the walls of the city of Jericho for 6 days. And on the 7th day, they let out a great shout, and the walls of Jericho crumbled. The Canaanites, they were kind of taken aside to the coastal areas, while the Israelites had controlled the hilly region, which is the high ground. We talked about this in a previous lecture, but they had the tactical advantage. So that's where we kind of have gotten to. And today we'll be talking about chapter 7, section 2, the return to Canaan there. So on your screen there, we will get started with really the notes for today. So let's jump in. So, the kings unite Israel. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different individuals, a bunch of different leaders, if you would. And all of this is going to be on the quiz, and all of this is going to be on the test. So, you need to make sure that you are kind of paying attention to the different names that I go through today, okay? So, the Philistines, they're actually later on, they're basically the Canaanites that we just talked about in review there. So the Philistines were the strongest people. Look at my 24-inch pythons, as Hulk Hogan used to say. The strongest people in Canaan around 1000 BC. Now, the Israelites, they feared the Philistines. Please, sir, can I have another? So, when you fear someone, you want to be them. So, they stop picking on you. Okay? So, the Israelites, they feared the Philistines. So, they started copying their ways. Yes, I'll be just like you. And the bad thing was they started to worship the Philistines' gods with an S. Remember, polytheistic means that you worship many gods. The Egyptians did. Ra, the sun god, Happy, the Nile River god, Isis, the goddess of magic, those things. But remember from last lecture, the Israelites were monotheistic. They only believed in one true God, and they called their God Yahweh. So, to keep from quarreling, fighting among themselves, and to save their religion because people were flocking to try to be like the Philistines, the 12 tribes, remember, Jacob, his 12 sons, created the 12 tribes, asked Samuel, a prophet, a person with visions, to choose a king. Now, like I said, a prophet is a person who claims to have these visions. He's claimed to be instructed by God. Now, Samuel, he warned the Israelites, do not choose a king. Don't do it. And I, Samuel, am not going to choose a king for you. Don't do it. But the Israelites really, really wanted a leader. So the Israelites, they named Saul king. And King Saul, he displeased God. So God chose another king, David. And God told Samuel to appoint David in secret. So really what you got here, you got two kings. You got Saul, who is the face of the Israelites, the king, and then you got the true king, David, who was appointed by Samuel. After Samuel warned them, hey, don't pick a king, and they picked Saul, and then God instructed Samuel to pick David as the rightful king of the Israelites, but in secret. Now, David, he was a famous warrior, but he was a little squirt. He was little, he was tiny, and he ended up killing a giant Philistine named Goliath. I'm Goliath. With just a slingshot and stones. Now, if you're thinking of slingshot, maybe you think of The Simpsons, where you got Bart Simpson. He always carries a slingshot in his back pocket, and you have the kind of tree-looking thing, and you pull it back. Boom! If you look on the screen here, it's more or less kind of like a sock, if you think about it. You put the little stone in the middle piece there, you sling it around, and whoom! Kind of like a whoop, or whip, I should say. He nailed him. Boom! Right between the eyes. And down he goes. Big Goliath. And David became immensely popular with the military, the people there of Israelites. And King Saul, after this, King Saul, remember, put David in charge of the army. But remember, David had just killed this giant Philistine. And David was popular. He was popular with everybody. Everybody loved David. And so Saul grew envious, and he was afraid that David would become too popular and he would kind of take over as the king. As we all know, he was really the king in secret anyway. So Saul grew envious of David and plotted to have him killed. So David kind of went into hiding until Saul and his sons were all killed themselves, because that's how popular David was. And then David ascended. He took the throne as the king of the Israelites out in the open. Okay? So David, he ends up driving out all the Philistines and even conquering other countries and building this glorious empire for the Israelites. And circle G because you need to know this. He established the capital of Israel as Jerusalem. And David was probably one of, if not the most popular kings to ever lead the Israelites. Circle H as well. So we said that David even conquered more lands and more people. And when you have more people under your rule, those people pay a tax or a tribute to the government. So everything that they have, they pay a little bit of tax money. It comes back, and that makes Jerusalem, that makes the Israelites even more powerful because of the money. The Israelites had also, not just the conquered people, but the Israelites also had to pay a heavy tax as well. Now, David used this money to expand his capital there in Jerusalem, to expand it, to make it look powerful, to be powerful in a sense, as all these other peoples kind of look to Israel as, okay, this is an empire here. Okay? Now, as we know, nobody lives forever. So Solomon was David's son, and he took the throne after David dies. And Solomon, he too was a strong king. I mean, look at my 24-inch pythons there. I hope you guys know who Hulk Hogan is. If you don't, WWE, NWO, WCW, Monday Night Wars, great YouTube, or purchase the WWE network. Not that I'm telling you to purchase that. So Solomon, like I said, strong king. He built a great temple of God in Jerusalem. Now, this temple, circle J because of this temple became the center of the Israelites' religious life and a symbol of their faith. And this is extremely important even today, as this temple theoretically does not exist, but something called the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall that we'll get to in section 3 does exist still of the temple of God. Okay? But remember, the temple of God, big religious center, it's the focus of the Israelites' life and a symbol really of their faith. Now, after David's dead, Solomon takes. Well, when Solomon died, well, the 12 tribes, they start fighting. Just think about it like this. You got siblings? You ever fight with your siblings? Beyond these doors right here, my kids, they're fighting. I hope you don't hear any of them. But they're like brothers. Remember, Jacob's 12 sons. This is what started the 12 tribes. So, yeah, they're like brothers, okay? But brothers fight. I could tell you stories of me and my brother growing up. One involved him locking me out of the house. One involved a broomstick to the back of the neck. Okay, I won't say any more about that. All right, so the 10 tribes, 10 of the tribes, 10 of the 12, there's 12, 10 of the tribes moved north, and they called their nation the Kingdom of Israel. And the other two tribes, they moved south and called their kingdom Judah. And the capital of Judah was Jerusalem. So, what David had established, Jerusalem, was the capital of the two tribes that went south in Judah. And the people of Jerusalem were called Jews. So, if you ever wonder, why does the Israelites, why are they called Jews? It all does with Jerusalem. Okay. So that's why the Israelites are called Jews, because of their capital established by David. You're going to need to know that for the quiz and test. Okay. Now, after creating the kingdoms, Israel and Judah, many Israelites, they forgot their religion. What? They forgot their religion? How do you forget a religion? Sports analogy time. Okay. So, if you like basketball, football, hockey, air hockey, whatever you like, if you want to get really good, I was a basketball player in high school. What? Don't laugh. I really was. So I was a basketball player in high school some 20 years ago. So The only way that you can stay focused on something is you practice. You practice your jump shot. You practice your plyometrics, your jump training. You practice running even because basketball is as my coach put it in high school, Coach Ronnie McCarver, shout out. It's kind of a run and gun type of deal. You got to be in good shape. If you don't practice, you're going to miss your shots. If you don't practice, you're going to lose. Okay. So you got to practice. The Israelites, how do you forget a religion over time? You simply do other things. You don't read the main Hebrew Bible. You don't read the Old Testament. You don't practice. You don't go through with the Mosaic laws that Moses created. You don't do those things. And if you don't do those things, well, over time, years, months, weeks, years, decades, centuries, you will lose what you had. And you don't teach it to your children, they will lose that as well. The prophets told the Israelites, return to God's laws and create a just society. How? How do you do that? The kingdoms of Israel and Judah, they also felt threatened by, well, the outside threat by the Assyrians, the Claudians, and they had powerful empires at this time. We've talked about this in previous chapters. And people, if they want your territory, if they want your land, sometimes they sit and they wait. And they wait until you're at your weakest. You're always stronger together than you are apart. So these outsiders, they were waiting for a ripe opportunity to come in and kind of take over this area of Canaan. And there's no better time than when you and your brothers are fighting the 12 tribes, and when they split, that's a sign of weakness. You're not together, you're quarreling, you're fighting, you're looking at each other, you're not looking at the outside. And that's what the Assyrians and the Claudians did. The Assyrians, they come in, they conquer Israel. Remember the 10 tribes to the north? They come in, they disperse the 10 tribes throughout the Assyrian Empire. These Israelites, they lost their religion. They become adapted to the Assyrian culture. And they were often referred to in history as the lost tribes of Israel. Circle D, you need to know this last sentence. The scattering of the Jews outside of Canaan is known as diaspora. I hope I pronounced that right, but that's what it's known as. When they scattered, when the Assyrians scattered them, these 10 tribes, and kind of put them in their own culture, and these individuals kind of assimilated into the Assyrian culture. So they became lost. They didn't do their religion. They became Assyrians in a sense. They're lost. They're the lost tribes of Israel. To appease God, the Assyrians offered sacrifices and began following the Israelites' religion. Now, the people of Judah, the 2 tribes to the south, they believed that God only accepted sacrifices from the temple at Jerusalem, that temple of God that Solomon built. They believed that they, the 2 tribes in the south, Judah, were God's only people. Because it's a two-way street. If you're kind of confused with what I'm saying here, it says to appease God, the Assyrians offered sacrifices. Well, there was a time where, as those 10 tribes were gaining knowledge of the Assyrian culture, the Assyrians at the same time, they were gaining knowledge of the Israelite culture, and they rubbed off on each other to a degree. But then the other 2 tribes down south, the 2 tribes that created Judah, they ended up saying, no, we are God's chosen people. Have you ever heard of a phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my, some of you said it, friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Enter the Egyptians. Remember, the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. Remember, the Pharaoh had the firstborn sons thrown in the Nile River to their death. The Pharaoh had chased the Israelites when Moses was leading them out. These are enemies. But the Egyptians conquered the kingdom of Judah in 620. No love lost there. But then the Claudians come in and conquered the Egyptians. So here's what happens. The Jews join forces with the Egyptians. What? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Egyptians and the Israelites, they don't like each other. But then the Claudians come in and conquered both of them. And the Israelites and the Claudians didn't like the Egyptians and the Israelites did not like the Claudians, so they joined forces. But it was not enough. Circle I, King Nebuchadnezzar and the Claudians captured Jerusalem and punished the Jews. He sent 10,000 Jews to Babylon and appointed a new Jewish king. Why? He captures 10,000 people. The Jews have a king, but Nebuchadnezzar appoints a new Jewish king, one that he can control. But the Israelites really, truly, down deep, do never accept this. The Claudians took the king and thousands of Jews to Babylon, and Circle K, this time period is known as the Babylonian captivity, to where the Israelites are again enslaved, just like they were in Egypt. So we've kind of come full circle, because we kind of started with them in Egypt being slaves. They rise to prominence under David and Solomon. They start feuding after Solomon's death. And now again, they are slaves. That concludes chapter 7, section 2. Hopefully, you learned just a little bit about the ancient Israelites. We've got one more section, chapter 7, section 3, and then we'll be done with this chapter. Hope you learned something. Yeah. Have a great day, evening, good night, good morning if you're listening to it in the morning, whatever the day may brings you. And as always, from